Welcome to the People Are People podcast, life lessons learned in real time, where we touch on the crazy realities of dealing with human behavior in the workplace. In 2022, I am presenting a series that I simply call the New Manager Series, where we will focus on a variety of topics every manager needs to know to be successful during and beyond their first year of management. Being a manager is not always a pretty job. It comes with highs and lows that you must prepare yourself to navigate. This week, we will be discussing communication in the workplace. So before we dive into this episode, please know that we're not going to get too much into the weeds of communication skills per se. That's a whole other episode. For this particular episode, I want to focus on electronic communication 101 for new managers. Frontline managers are the gatekeeper to a lot of the noise that can enter a particular department or a team. And I'm speaking more in terms of corporate America. I think that what I am going to talk about can be meaningful across the board to anyone who is a manager. But I just want to call out that a lot of the information that I'm going to cover in this episode will likely ring true for a lot of corporate-based managers. So we're going to focus mainly on the many different ways to manage the tsunami of communication that will come your way as a frontline manager. Frontline managers are perhaps the most underappreciated role in the chain of command for leadership. They are the gatekeeper to a lot of the noise that comes in from customers that are external to the company, from your internal customers, from the associates or employees, from the peers of the employees. They are literally a talented gatekeeper who has to tackle a lot of information that's coming at their way or coming at them from various directions, and they have to be timely. People are expecting them to often be accurate, and they have to show that they are engaged in a lot of the work that's coming their way via the electronic communication. So when I speak of, electronic communication, what I'm speaking of mainly are emails, instant messaging, and phone calls, even for that matter. Those are some of the baseline things that I'm talking about. I would even add, I said electronic, but perhaps I should add face-to-face, because although we are in a pandemic and have been for the last 2 years, there are a lot of people returning into the corporate environment, or they're coming back into the office setting where they're now also having to deal with communicating with people face-to-face on top of all of the other technology that they're juggling. So let's start with emails. And I'm going to share a story with you. I can remember my first week as a manager in a corporate space. And it was my first job out the gate. Now, I had been in leadership types of roles previously in the military, but this was perhaps my first time coming into a managerial role in a corporate environment and having to deal with just basic email. And I want to say it was my third or fourth day of being in the position, and I was just really starting to experience what the emails were like, because previously I just did not have to deal with that volume of email. I had gone from being in a leadership position in the military to functioning more in a frontline position, and then I decided I wanted to move into management. And so the email volume that I dealt with back at that time, maybe 1 or 2 a day at the most. I mean, emails there wasn't a whole lot coming at you as a frontline employee. And so I came into this position and I was like, I had to hit the ground running. So, there was an expectation that I was going to transfer the knowledge that I had over to building a team, a department, and building relationships with, a lot of different people within the department, within my organization, as well as outside of the organization. And along the way, I was getting a lot of phone calls during the first few days. I was having to answer a lot of questions for staff who, in my opinion, had been there long enough to know the answer to some of the questions they were asking me, but it was a test, right? We'll talk about those types of situations in another podcast, but I was being tested on many levels. And so there came a point, like, as I said, around, I think it was day 3 or 4, there had been an email apparently that had come through. There had been an email that had come through from a director level in another department who had a question for me about something. I saw the email. I responded to the email, but I said, hey, I'm going to have to follow up with you about that. And, basically it took me a day to get the answer. But before I could get the answer back to this individual, via email or, go to her office to talk to her about what I had found, I had to meet with my new VP. So I had a one-to-one meeting that was scheduled, unfortunately, before I could go and convey the answer to her. And so as I sat down with my VP, the first thing that she had on her list for me was something about this email. And she let me know that she had received a complaint that I hadn't followed up yet. And so honestly, I was so frustrated that this person went to my boss and she did not come to me to say, hey, just wanted to follow up with you about this. Because to me, that's common courtesy, that you go back to the source before you start leaping up the chain to lodge a complaint. But that's what she did. She went to that person. And so, I didn't, quote, get in trouble per se, but she just my boss let me know that, hey, this is this person, this is how she is. You have to keep her in the loop and stay on top of it. She's going to raise a stink and she's going to come to me. And then if she doesn't get what she wants from me, she's going to go to the next person. I appreciated my boss giving me the heads up about it, but I was really frustrated because that's one of my button pushers, honestly. For me, it's like, if you've got an issue with someone, start with that person before you start leaping up the chain to get an answer, in all fairness to them. So that was the first lesson I learned about email communication and following up. And so my takeaway, my lesson learned in that situation was to always maintain ongoing communication that is indicative of follow-up. So if someone is asking you for something via email, you always want to create a documentation trail that shows your effort, particularly if you don't achieve something in a time period. And that's the other thing. You want to ensure that if someone is reaching out to you for something that requires problem solving on your part, that you send some sort of acknowledgement that you've seen the email. Give them a time frame for which you're going to follow up with them. Make sure you follow up with them within that time frame. Even if you don't have an answer, let them know that you're still trying to get the answer. If there's some additional detail that they need to know for why there's a delay, such as you're waiting for an answer from someone else, or someone that has the information is out of the office for the day, or maybe they're logged off, make sure you convey that within that window of time that you have promised follow-up or feedback. And I say that because this was a perfect example. Luckily, my VP was understanding, and she kind of clearly had her own opinion about this person who had just kind of, like I said, leapt over me and went straight to her to complain about me not following up, I guess, in the time frame that she felt she needed to receive the information. But for me, it was my lesson learned. I always, after I calm down, I always kind of take a step back and say, okay, what could I have learned from this? And so after that happened to me, from that point forward, anytime I was dealing with someone and they were seeking information from me that was mine, I always either tried to make it a point to give them an answer within a window of time. If I couldn't give them that answer within that window of time, I let them know when I would follow up with them. Let's say I'm tied up with meetings. If there were 20 meetings that were going to slow me down from getting the answer and there was no one else who could get it for me, I would let them know that this is what's going on. Or if someone else is looking into it, I would give them that information. So yes, make sure you're very clear with your follow-up with people when they're asking for information. Give them a timeline. That also allows them to respond back to you and let you know if they need the information within a window of time as well. The other great thing about doing that is it creates a trail. So if we use the example for me in which I said I sat down to have a one-to-one with my boss before going to give this person the information that I located, had I created that paper trail I could have said, well, I told her I would have this information to her by X time, and I'm well within my window of time. And I could have pointed out that she did not give me a timeline for, in which she needed the information. So make sure your follow-ups are well documented, your strategy, your plan. If it's not going to be an immediate answer, make sure you identify who your accountable or responsible parties are that are involved with you getting this information to that person. And, make sure that they are in agreement with the timeline that you have put forth in getting them the information. When we utilize email, I think one of the biggest challenges that we sometimes run into is our tone. And I know that we run into it. I'm guilty of it. I think a lot of people are guilty of not watching their tone in emails. Now, some people just don't care how they come across in emails, and that's them. But if you are someone who is aware of how people may receive you, or you want to present a professional appearance in your email at all times, take the time to watch your tone. Obviously, you always want to follow the basic guidelines when it comes to email etiquette, such as not typing in all caps or poor spelling or grammar. You want to make sure your emails are clear. If you find that you're writing 2 paragraphs in your response, look for ways to really create additional white space by bullet pointing the main points that you need to convey in your communication. You want it to be something that people can easily review in under 2 or 3 minutes, because everyone is busy. You're busy, they're busy. No one has time to read a dissertation. They want to get in and out of that email as much as you. So if you find that you're creating run-on sentences in your response to a question or your outreach to someone for information, simplify, bullet point. Make sure that it's clear why you're contacting them, what you need, and how soon you need that information. Also, what I would encourage you to do is to examine or evaluate your emotional state. Sometimes when we're dealing with emails and someone catches us at the wrong time, if someone catches us at the wrong time, in the wrong mood, maybe they have sent something that has frustrated us to the point that we just want to throttle them, then you want to take a step away from your computer. Step away from the keyboard, put down your phone if you're, responding via or a text message, and collect yourself, because you never want to come across as agitated or angry in an email about something, unless that is your intent. But typically, people don't want to present that way in the workplace. You want to demonstrate that you've kept a cool head. You want to stick to the facts. Don't let your emotions get in the mix, because sometimes your emails are like your defense in court, is what I say. Because again, if you're a frontline manager, there's usually 5 or 6 other people above your head. And if something gets escalated to them, you always want to be able to leverage your email communication as proof that you've done your due diligence, and that if this person is anxious about something, it's beyond your control, and you, like I said, you've done all that you can do for them, and that you maintained a professional demeanor throughout that experience or that exchange. So we've talked about tone. We've talked about responding in a timely fashion for follow-up items. How often should you check your emails? Well, I would recommend that you aim for at least every hour, every 1 to 2 hours, check your emails. You never know if something urgent is coming through. Even if you're not in a business where it's life or death, it may not be life or death to you, but it may be feeling that way to the person sending you the email. So you want to try to check your email every 1 to 2 hours to see if there's anything in there that requires your attention. Again, you still make sure you take the steps to follow the process of acknowledging emails. Even if you can't get them the answer they need in that moment, respond and say, hey, I'm checking on that. Let me check on that. I should have an answer for you in the next hour. I've got 2 meetings, but I should have something to you by 3 p.m. today. Just acknowledge it so that people are aware that you have seen the inquiry and that you're going to act on it. CC mailing and blind copying people. I really used to wish that they would just take that button off of the email messages for Outlook, because people get so happy with copying this person and blind copying that person. And, a lot of times they have nothing to do with it, or they're trying to use the name to sway you or move you in a direction to suit their needs. Or, some people just blind copy or copy everybody on the email because they want to cover their own butts. And I guess to some extent that's okay if truly you're just trying to CYA in a particular instance. But, I just recommend that you don't have to do that unless it's warranted. Because what happens is the people that you're copying on the emails, if you continue to do that, they eventually just start to tune them out because they can't distinguish what's important and what's FYI and where you're just name dropping. And so that then minimizes the importance of the email for them because they don't necessarily know what it is they should be paying attention to. And they're going to be looking to you at that point to just let them know when their help is needed. So that's another thing. Just, take care with the CC mails. You don't want to diminish their importance. Let's talk a little bit about instant messaging briefly. With the pandemic, we've experienced huge shift in our technology and the use of instant messaging. Over the last 2 to 3 years, I'd say it was kind of there all along, but with with people having to move into a work at home environment, it just really, I think, amplified the importance of this particular tool because you could no longer just go around the corner to someone's office or to someone's cubicle and ask a question of them. You had to now rely on your instant messaging or texting even to get a quick response that happens outside of the email system. So what I would recommend is be aware of what your organization's policy is around instant messaging. I worked in an organization where, and I think I talked about this before, where I had like 6 different leaders in an 18-month period. And so I had some leaders who really didn't care if you were on IM or not for them to contact you. They just wanted to be able to get in touch with you. If you were an email person and you were checking your emails every hour, fine with that. They didn't have to be able to get you right away in instant messaging. I had another leader who wanted you to be on. I think it was more her way of checking to see who was working or not working, but she wanted everyone to be accessible via IM and MS Teams. So be aware of what the expectations are around that. It could potentially lead to some type of performance action if for any reason you're not leveraging that system the way you should be. Same rules apply as it relates to etiquette. But if you have the flexibility and you're autonomous in which tools you're using, meaning you can elect to use emails over IM or vice versa. Figure out what works best for you. For me, I used to honestly stay in do not disturb mode because it was a lot to manage the email traffic that was coming in and try to keep up with text messaging and sit on meetings all at the same time. The reality is if you're sitting on a meeting and you're supposed to be engaged with everything that's happening on that call, you're going to miss something because you're over here responding to IMs. You're over here responding to emails. You're going to miss the fact that there's a $1 million bogey that you're supposed to be considering options in trimming your budget to meet. That's the reality of it. So if you have the autonomy of it, of choosing your technology to help you get through your day, definitely take advantage of that. Identify where you're strong and where you're weak and move forward in that sense. Make sure people are aware of the best way to reach you. Again, if you do have that autonomy, if you know you're not going to have your IMs on, make sure your team that you're managing and or the peers that you work most with, they are very aware of how to reach you via email. Now, if you're in an environment where you're utilizing phones or maybe you're utilizing cell phone technology and someone is able to text you, again, you want to make sure you're checking your messages frequently. I would say for me, the biggest challenge was having an office line and having a cell phone because, I would have people who on my team were sometimes texting me. And so I wouldn't even see the text for a few hours because I was busy over here in email IM world and sitting on calls. So this is just another thing for you to consider if you are in that type of a workspace where you're not only having to keep up with IMs, but you're also having to keep up with emails and you're having to keep up with text messages. Definitely work on what your system might look like. I recommend checking once an hour, every 1 to 2 hours. It's hard, unless you can put it up somewhere where it's going to jump out at you every time someone text messages you. Now, some companies, thankfully, are advanced and, text messages are integrated in IM space, so they don't have to worry about missing things as much. But if you are in a company where those things are not integrated, then you're definitely going to want to, like I said, either figure out a way to put that phone in a place where you will see it if someone text messages you or calls you, or just set up a system where you're checking it every hour. Finally, if you are back in an environment where things have gone face to face, make sure your team is aware of your schedule. One of the things that I used to do when I was in an office environment is if I knew I was going to be on a meeting call for a couple of hours or back-to-back meetings, I would make sure my team knew that, hey, you're not going to be able to just pop into my office when you want to ask a question because I'm going to be on calls all day. So the best way to reach me will likely be via email, or I can stop by and check with you if you just give me a heads up that you need me to come by and check on you during my next break, because it was too much for me to have them coming into my office while I was supposed to be listening on a call and or dealing with emails and IMs. So, that's my recommendation to you as it relates to face-to-face. Find the thing that's going to work best for you, but you may want to consider creating a schedule. So those are just a few of the tips that I have for you as relates to communication 101 for new managers. Again, we didn't get into the skill set of what communication means. I wanted to really spend this time talking about managing the technology, managing how you go about following up with people, creating documentation trails so that you've got yourself covered, particularly if you're in an environment that is so busy that you could easily miss something or drop the ball on something. You always want to make sure that you are covering yourself with documentation. And it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It can be very simple. Remember to take care not to negate the importance of communication and using your tools for everyone that you're going to come in contact with during those first 90 days and beyond. Become a subject matter expert, you're going to need to be that person. So that concludes the People Are People podcast, life lessons learned in real time. Please stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next episode.